So, a couple of years ago, I moved away from calling myself an anti-feminist, mostly because I didn't like defining myself in opposition to something. Um, it kind of only points to what I'm against, not really what I'm for, right? You know, um, I am a Christian, and most of the philosophical ideas that I have are filtered through a Christian lens, my understanding of Christianity in that perspective, and the different writings of other people that feel similarly from that point forward, right? So it's better to kind of highlight that being the basis or the source of my morality, my thoughts, my feelings, why I feel the way I feel about people, about society in general, right? So that's why I, particularly, moved away from anti-feminism, so to speak. Now, of course, I am still against the concept of feminism, just as far as focusing on responding to feminists. I haven't really done that over the years. I've kind of only really skirted the lines of doing so because a lot of feminist thought has morphed, evolved, changed. The way its presentation, better to say, ironically enough, is now more, which is actually pretty interesting, it's now more interwoven in the belief systems than something more directly focused on. Like in the early days, back about like 10 years ago, 2014, 2016, you would have bedroom feminists, a lot of people on Tumblr. You had, was it Just Ask Jezebel or something like that? Some news columns, BuzzFeed. There was a more direct, specific focus on women trying to convince other women and having a back and forth between whether males could be feminists or whether they're feminist allies. It was hilarious. It was stupid. But there's a more, you would say, direct conversation on feminism. But now, most people who are on the internet and they do lots of video essays are feminists, but they don't feel the need to even explain or defend the concept anymore. Now they just take it for granted that this be what it is. Originally, feminists did have to argue that what they believed is true. Now they don't really do that anymore. Now they just assume that what they believe is true, and they just scoff at any opposition, and they don't actually really address it. Or when male issues are oftentimes brought up, they often love to play tit for tat. Now, Abba and Preach, to get more directly into what this video is about, reviewed a good bit of the middle ground conversation on Jubilee that had just pearly things, a few other MRAs, and against feminists. One of which is a particular feminist that she and I will have our battle one of these days. I promise you guys that, because this woman gets away with way too much. Anyway, so Abba and Preach make a point in the video that I think needs to be highlighted and directly shown as to exactly why we're stuck doing the same thing when it comes to conversations with feminists. So this clip plays here, and Abba rants with this position, and I'm just going to let it play to kind of prove the point.
Because we want to talk about traditional relationships, and that's how it should be. The mom should stay home with the kids and the dad is the provider and all that. But then when it comes to the family court, we want to be like, oh, dads need 50% custody. But you don't even know your kid. You've been off providing all this time. And the only reason now you want 50% custody is because that's the only thing that still connects you to the woman, or whatever up reason you have. But it has nothing to do with the children at heart. It has to do with, I'm their father, I deserve 50% custody. But where were you the first 10, 15 years that we were raising the kids?
I'm not denying that they need their mothers or their fathers more.
I feel like this whole conversation is going to be the men's rights activists putting up this caricature of like this money hungry, like conniving woman who just wants to spite the man.
And the feminists
are going to make this thing of like deadbeat loser who wants nothing to do with a kid. And everything so far has been like, I'm going to argue against the caricature of the worst example of what a men's rights activist is. And then the opposite is true for the feminists and the women.
Men and women.
That's why I don't like these questions, because we get into this comparative state. And essentially what we're saying is, who should we focus on more? when it comes to this issue? Who has it worse? And we start playing this game of like, well, women have it worse, or actually men have it worse. And then if men argue too much, and they actually just hate women's causes, and if women argue too much, they've never liked men's causes. It's just getting into this whole comparative suffering thing, whether it's black, Asian, white, Chinese, man, woman, all this other stuff, it is most often pointless and counterproductive. You spend more time discussing who suffers more and who suffers less, and less time acknowledging the other person's suffering.
Suffering Olympics.
Exactly. Right? So you're in competition. There's literally no opportunity here for you guys to work together because you're too busy being like, I have it worse. Right? And in order for you to be able to say that you have it worse, you have to discredit the other side. How are you ever going to build? So to me, this kind of conversation is one of the dumbest you can have because there's no building. There's no opportunities for you guys to bridge the gap. A better question would have been like, what are some ways that men suffer that you can acknowledge? What are some ways, and then asking the men's rights activists, what are some ways women suffer that you're ready to acknowledge? Find where the points of commonality are, instead of asking you, why are you having it worse than this group? To me, it just seems like a stupid way to have this conversation.
Now, at first, I felt that it was incumbent to respond to it, to explain that. But I really don't need to. I don't need to explain why it's goofy to pretend that men's rights and feminists are just in oppression Olympics, because it's not really fair or accurate to the position of the men's rights activists, who oftentimes have to spend a lot of time not only just defending their public image and cleaning that up to make it seem like they're not crazy misogynistic people, but also have to work double time to prove the things that they say are true. What's really interesting is that Abba himself, in the same video, in the next couple of minutes, proves the entire problem of the discourse, and I don't even think he recognized it. In fact, this clip plays, and then Abba responds to it.
You really touched on it. Men shoot themselves in the foot often. There's just this idea that it's the same way you see poor people attacking other poor people because they're not getting paid enough. Men will attack other men because it threatens their masculinity or because they're insecure in it. When again, I'm just like a broken record player here. It's not a real concept. Masculinity is not a real concept. Femininity is not a real concept. These are just things that just hold us back. And like you said, it halts us from really truly like feeling heard, getting our feelings out there, and like experiencing more empathy. We need to, again, destroy the system, destroy the patriarchy, and come up with a system that has empathy for everybody, because it just doesn't.
I think what's important to recognize is that misandry is not a systemic issue. It's not ingrained in us to the extent that there is like rhetorical misandry of like women saying, I hate all men, you know, it's just like individualized, like, yeah, sure, unhelpful things, but it's not an otherization in the same way that misogyny is.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, I think that the world has been largely constructed through the male and man lens, and in a way that has otherized women, and so yeah, misogyny is more endemic to.
This is one of those notions about patriarchy that I find one of the dumbest. They see men in power, and they see women suffering. And so they go, look, men are deciding to make women suffer, rather than not recognizing that this is just people in power making everyone below them suffer.
Yeah, men
in what way do men benefit so much from having all these men in power? Whenever it comes to war and conflicts that these men decide on, they send us poor people or regular people to go fight and die in the wars, right? And I say us like I'm still there, and like I'm obviously doing well for myself now. But most of my life, I've been one of those regular people, right? I was in the military at that point. It is the regular people at the behest of those rich people that are going out there. So how is this society built for men when men are the ones who are dying the most? Men are the ones who are going to war the most. Men are the ones who are just out there just getting shot up and shit. Like, if what you were saying was true and men have just made this world through the man's lens and to benefit men at all costs or whatever it is, then why is it that men overwhelmingly suffer some of the most negative consequences?
Be careful there, Abba. You sound something like an MRA. Yeah, my friends, that is the entire problem with feminism. The entire problem of any feminist discourse comes down to this is hilariously simple. It almost feels kind of stupid to make a whole video about it. It comes down to the fact that it's not true. And they have gotten really far with a lot of belief structures and things they say that just aren't true. The worst part about feminism, beyond the fact that a lot of the conclusions and belief structures come from things that just aren't true is not only the fact that it's convinced a lot of people to just kind of believe it wholesale and then come to radically strange conclusions and positions and belief structures beyond what was originally just not true. One of the bigger problems is the fact that they oftentimes, in principle, set themselves up in opposition to males. For example, let's talk about man-repellent clothing. I'm going to revisit this one in the near future, but I'm going to use it just as a point, as a quick, shallow point, to show that there are some ladies that will go out of their way to dress in a manner, from their position, as a way to cast off male attention because they don't like the so-called male gaze. And the male gaze is an interesting position or an interesting thought that was originally a form of film critique, but somehow has become like an actual belief that like male desirability of women is like a force in the world that ladies have to deal with, so much so that it even colors the way they perceive themselves. It's a lot of like overthinking to just the concept of being beautiful or sexually attractive, but I digress. The point is that the female gaze is set up in opposition to the male gaze as an oppressive force. The nature of feminism in and of itself is taking the concept of Marxism and breaking it down into two sides that just doesn't functionally make sense. The problem of Marxism is that Marx denoted that there was a problem or there's a clash between the people in positions of power and all of the workers underneath them. There are differences in classes. And the thing is, the breakdown of classes isn't really even as binary as just lots of people with money, but there's also people with no money in between the people that have a good amount of money that are financially stable. It's kind of complex. It's really not even as simple as even Marx put it. But the issue is when you take the class struggle and you apply it to males and females, it really gets bent out of shape. And you get to the problem that, again, feminism isn't true in principle. The patriarchy isn't true. Most of the examples of sexism, the motivations that they project males to have isn't true. It's just not true. The issue when it comes to MRAs or any male having a problem or a grievance about the way that they're treated in society is that you have to come to bat against something that isn't correct and honestly doesn't even make sense. What was funny is Abba expresses in the clip here that he doesn't like the fact that MRAs have to battle against feminists to prove which side has it worse. And to a certain extent, I somewhat agree with him that trying to argue about which side has it worse is bad. The problem with that is that MRAs don't really need to do that. Most of the time, MRAs aren't doing that. What MRAs are typically doing is to say, males have these problems. And to be honest with you, MRAs don't even need to technically be in opposition to feminists. Feminists, on the other hand, who want to express the advocacy of female rights or women's rights, put themselves in opposition to not even, ironically, MRAs, but to the concept of males in general. The patriarchy itself does not extend to MRAs as an adversary. Feminism as a concept extends to males, the class, the being, the existence as the problem. Males are such a problem in existence for females that our sexual desire for them, which helped create them, by the way, is codified as the male gaze and is something that must be raged against. What Abba even sees in the video itself are more examples of sexism against men. Women project that again, feminists project that again, the sexual desires of males and our physical strength as males make us a danger to women unto ourselves. It's not MRAs that are a danger to women, it's males who are a danger unto women. And then when MRAs say, well, males are also a danger to other males, so it's probably a little more complex than that, as well as there are some females who are a danger to males, not only do feminists scoff at the fact that a woman could be a danger to a male, as if weaponry has not existed since the dawn of humanity, more than that, they scoff at the idea that males being a problem to males is a problem that should be addressed. That self-defense isn't a responsibility of the human being that exists in the world, but that there's something fundamentally wrong with males, that even males are an issue against other males. And then they scoff at the fact that males have to fight other males, as if males didn't know since, once again, time in memoriam, that they have to fight each other. As if we don't have concepts of good and evil here and there and whatever. There's other videos I've made that cover these topics. The point that I'm making is that a lot of what feminism isn't true. And the opposition that MRAs or any male or MGTOW or whatever, anyone in the manosphere comes when discussing these problems, doesn't come because they want to say men have a worse time in society. They just want to say men have a bad time in society. Ironically enough, when the original Jubilee question was asked, it was asked if men had all of their rights. Pearl, someone that Abba and Preach and many people don't like, does lay out that males don't have all of their rights. For example, when it comes to custody disputes, males have a very tough time gaining parity in custody with the mothers of their children. And there's lots of different reasons why that be the case, but oftentimes men have to spend more time proving that they're a good parent to even get 50% custody than it being a default position that has to be argued for or against. Again, there's multiple complex reasons that go beyond simply being a male, but there are implications and problems with being a man that makes these custody battles problematic for men because of the different biases and because human beings are human beings who are interpreting the laws and applying the laws as judges, lawyers, and the opposing case, the mother of the children who probably has a chip on her shoulder because of the father of the kids or her ex-husband or whatever, it gets more complex than simply men have an issue, and that can be analyzed. The issue is that the immediate response that Pearl Davis got was a woman saying that women have a worse time, and that was the immediate response. I don't need to say anything more than that. You can just watch it right here.
It's 50% their DNA. They should get 50% custody off the bat. And right now, 90% of the time, women get custody. The question was, do men have all of their rights? How can I say that they have all of their rights when I'm finding guy after guy after guy that is devastated he can't talk to his children? I had one guy who the woman got custody, and she ended up taking the kid to a different country. And now his kid doesn't speak his same language. He spent $300,000 trying to get that kid back.
I want to look at women's stories as to why they don't want to get there. And I could go interview 1,000 women. You're looking for these kinds of men.
What she's discussing are individual and yes, tragic cases, and we can acknowledge that. But what we're discussing is a systemic issue. On aggregate, men and women after divorce, women see a 27% decline in the reduction of their income. They're more likely to be in poverty, and they're less likely to get.
Ultimately, the issues that MRAs are discussing should be handled as if they're just a separate organization handling a separate problem, or at least it could be. For example, the moving company that moves your furniture is solving the problem that you need your furniture moved, right? In the same way, the construction workers who fix potholes and lay down the streets and the roads and paves them and makes them better solves the problem, that there are potholes in the street. Different people are solving different problems. Precisely my point. You see how you were able to immediately see that, dear viewer? Exactly. But for some reason, when it comes to MRAs, they're not a separate construction team doing a separate job. No, they're a part of the opposing force in the Matrix. They're agents of the Matrix battling against the chosen ones that are feminists. So to summarize and conclude, 1, Abba experienced in real time what it was like to be an MRA, and I didn't finish the video, so maybe he ironically and hilariously acknowledges that he just in real time experienced being an MRA, and maybe he thinks that it isn't MRAs are just trying to do an impression Olympics or a suffering Olympics, and they really cannot get past just expressing factual truths about the world like Abba just did. Maybe. I kind of doubt it. But I do think it's important to highlight that someone who isn't an MRA experiences the world as a male and simply just says what is true in opposition to what is not true. And that is the entire issue of feminism as a concept. Something that I've noticed, which is rather interesting to me, is that most of the time, feminists are actually very intelligent people. Most of the time, they're actually very thoughtful people. And a lot of the time, they're actually really good at deconstructing. But insofar as they're intelligent, because they spend a lot of time trying to make a conclusion that isn't true look correct or right, they end up sounding stupid or crazy or absurd to everyone that doesn't already accept the conclusion that was made. And that conclusion being that males are an imposing force upon females unto themselves. Not the character of the male, not the culture of the male, not the position that the male came from. There's a lot of intersectional bullshit that occurs, but at the end of the day, it's still man is battling against woman in some faux pas war that completely ignores the fact that there are more stories of men trying to protect and defend women than there were ever stories of men just trying to hurt women. And that most stories and most understandings of the world are found through some type of moral code of good fighting evil. Anyway, the point that I'm making today is that feminism, in principle, is not true. A lot of the conclusions aren't true, and a lot of the times the reason why there's this whole argument between the suffering Olympics is because feminism can only thrive in the delusion that women are suffering, which takes advantage of the fact that men who really love women wish to alleviate that suffering. If it comes to the fact or comes to the point that the world acknowledges or realizes that women aren't suffering unto the fact that they're women, and maybe particular women in particular classes or circumstances are suffering, then the entire crux or thesis that makes feminism live dies. And feminists can't have that. They can't exist in a world where women don't have a worse time. Because if they did, then they would have to stop being a feminist wholesale and just solve their own actual problems as a human being in the world, not as a woman in opposition to males. So with that being said, I still hope you guys got something out of today's video. And if you did, I don't know, man, go ahead and click the like button. Yeah, shoot. Go ahead and click the subscribe button. Comment in the comment box below. As always, you guys have yourselves a great day. I will see you cool cats soon. Adios.